You're listening to Growing Hope Conversations, the podcast from Growing Hope, a charity offering free therapy for children and young people with additional needs and support for their families. Join our host Bambi French as she welcomes guests who've been there, sharing real stories, honest struggles, and how churches can truly make a difference.
David and Joanna, welcome to the Growing Hope podcast. How are you?
Good, thank you.
It's nice to see you both. Before we get into our conversation, do you want to just introduce yourselves and tell us all who you are and what it is you do?
So my name's David. I'm a Church of England vicar. So I lead a small group of churches in the Oxford Diocese on the edge of London.
I'm Jo. I used to be an English teacher and I did a Master's in Inclusive Education. I've got quite a similar history to you, potentially. Master's in Inclusive Education. We moved to Oxford for David's training when I was pregnant with our oldest child. And about 5 months into his life, he was diagnosed with Williams syndrome, which is a rare genetic disability. I think I'd already decided prior to him arriving that I wouldn't be going back into mainstream because part of the Master's was a specialist dyslexia qualification as well. Working independently as a tutor fits better with the ministry life anyway. So I've been doing that since then. So I've got some additional qualifications in dyscalculia. And I'm currently trying to work my way through a diploma in autism and mental health, but it's taken a while. Working full time now, online as a tutor, and we've got four boys.
How do those challenges kind of play out at church? You know, when you've got those roles as leaders, and then you've got your children as well. Does having additional needs within your family bring particular challenges to your church life?
It's hard to answer that because I've never been a parent of children who didn't have additional needs. And the way like being a vicar is that we don't sort of meet up for chats about how horrible life is sort of over a water cooler. So I genuinely don't know what it would be like if we had neurotypical kids to be in ministry. It adds, I think, to the way we do ministry, a vulnerability that comes at a cost, but also brings value to what we do in ministry. It helps us to be open with people. It helps us not to, you can't put up a pretense of invulnerability or perfection when that's obviously not the truth of the life we're living. And so we do ministry with a lot of families who also live with disability and additional need in their families. And it means that we have a point of connection with people. There's no sense in which we ever come across as being like, if only you were a better parent, I'm sure your children would behave better, because, we live, one advantage of having 4 children is that it's really clear that our parenting isn't the dominating factor in the way our children behave, because, a lot of the time 3 of them will be fine and 1 of them will be struggling, or 3 of them will be struggling and 1 will be fine. And you're like, well, it's nothing to do with me because they're all behaving differently.
Do you feel like, have you ever felt, because now you're saying that actually you basically come as you are, don't you, to church, and you show that actually it's not all perfect. Do you feel though that maybe sometimes people expect more of you, your children, your family because of the position that you hold in church?
I think because of the way passages like Timothy have been taught in the past, which speak of pastor, how, I can't remember the exact quote, I'm afraid, but it essentially implies that your children should be well behaved if you want to be a pastor, because if you can't look after your own children, how are you going to look after the church? And I think that sometimes gets applied in a really straight line way into, well, if your children are like having a meltdown, or a child with an intellectual disability sometimes just doesn't understand the expected behavioral norms. And so where we're living with that difference, I think there can be preconceptions. So one of the things that I did during my curacy, and that we've rolled out several times, we've done a course like Alpha on disability theology that looks at what the Bible says about disability, about what it doesn't say about disability, some of the preconceptions people have, and therefore helping people to appreciate what those different ways of being mean for being in the church. And I think through helping people to gain understanding, we've been able to sort of break down some of those barriers that the sort of assumptions we get can so easily, people just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of what you're doing is around, I guess, the education or the re-education of people around what the preconceived ideas around of how people should behave or what things should look like. Actually, you're presenting a different view of that. What else do you do in terms of like the education and the increasing sort of knowledge and understanding for parents?
So I've just finished a master's in sort of theology and ministry, and I spent my final year focusing on the question of why does Jesus heal, and exploring some of those questions. The urgency with which Jesus heals on the Sabbath, in a way that it feels, Jesus can't wait until the sun sets. He's got to heal the person now, even though that'll come at a cost. In John 5, Jesus goes and meets the man by the well, and he heals one person at this pool, but we know that there's a whole crowd of disabled people there. And so there he only heals one person, and exploring some of the unexpected challenges of Jesus's healing ministry in the Gospels. So to try and share some of that learning with the church and really ground it in the pastoral reality of what does it mean when we do prayer ministry with people who are disabled or neurodivergent? How do we respect, people come sometimes to prayer ministry with a real hope of a physical cure for a disability. And I don't want to be the person who says God won't do that because he does it in the Bible. But at the same time, we've worked with people with disability who'd be like, no, my disability is not something God needs to change. It's who I am, part of who God's made me to be. And I also don't want to take that sort of self-confidence away from anyone by saying, oh no, you need to be. We need to be able to live in the mystery of both of those hopes being biblical and true, and honouring what God is doing in people. And not just assuming that because my body works this way that everyone should. I've often reflected that as a church minister, doing a service that's inclusive of everyone who's disabled is impossible, because one of our kids loves music and talking to people and interacting and drumming, and others of our kids, neurodiversity, they prefer calm, they prefer quiet, they prefer order and regulation. So actually what we feel is really important is being able to have different services for us in different locations that minister to people in different ways, so that in our diversity of worship we reflect something of the diversity of how God has made people. So we look after 4 churches. In one of the churches, sort of through a lot of work over the last few years from the team there, really able to grow a family's children's ministry that is really sort of loud and interactive, and for some neurodivergent kids, really overwhelming and just not possible. And so another one of our churches that's, in a beautiful countryside, medieval sort of setting, we started doing Muddy Church, which was outside. It was story and fire and hot chocolate and a bit of singing. But if you want to just go and run around the churchyard, you can just go and run around the churchyard. And so we did that for about, a year, 18 months. Being British, and it being outside, it became really difficult to manage. So we've now...
But it had attracted families who had kids with additional needs. And we hadn't quite realised the link until one of those mums posted in a Christian parent carers group about the Muddy Church she went to and how it was really well suited to her neurodivergent family. And it was only then really that we started to realise that we'd accidentally tailored it.
So we now do a similar thing, but with Lego. So we can do that inside. And so again, it's about telling the story, shoulder to shoulder ministry, in that we're all sort of focusing on what we're building. And there's, some of the kids who come along really get into building the Bible story we're talking about. Some of them are just building a space thing.
Yeah. It's really interesting you say that, actually, because a lot of the the all age worship that I have seen and experienced and been involved with in church is we always we tend to go towards kind of the kind of children's TV feel like everyone up dancing, the noise, the music, and actually, I've sometimes wondered, is this working for everyone? There's a lot going on, and lots of children, and adults find it really fun when things like that go on. But then there are others in that space who find that very, very difficult. So it's interesting.
Our 13-year-old who has Williams syndrome, he enjoys those services. I think he's very sociable, and he loves people and he loves music. But actually, he started probably a couple of years ago now. Started attending the 8 o'clock communion with David because he's an early riser, and he also really loves the BCP service, partly because there's a lovely small community of elderly people who have taken him under their wing and show an interest in him, but he also talks about enjoying the peace and quiet, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah, and it's predictable, and you know what's going to happen. He can learn the words of the service, he can learn the prayers, because the prayers are the same every week. And I think it's a form of spirituality. I come from a charismatic evangelical background. It's the sort of thing I would have hated growing up and felt was just like dead because it's the same every week. What part of my maturing has been recognizing that God delights in all sorts of different ways of people coming to him. I grew up in a point where it's like, you can't put God in a box. You've got to be able to do all these other things. But I think we put God in a different box that was like, it's got to be like this. It's got to be loud and it's got to be exciting. And we said God couldn't be in the box of contemplative or quiet or ordered in that sort of traditional sense.
You also run a Facebook group, is that right?
Yeah, there's 2 Facebook groups that we set up. One is for clergy families who have kids with additional needs, so sort of supporting one another through life in the fishbowl, and just a place for prayer requests. Sometimes the prayer requests that couldn't go on a general group for parents of children with additional needs because of the privacy needed or the understanding needed that extra niche characteristic adds. There's also have another Facebook group that is for Christian parents of children with additional needs.
Yeah, because for Anglican clergy, Church of England clergy, because we live in tied housing, it's the sort of who do you talk to about how you negotiate a walk-in, like a wet room with a diocesan housing department? That's not something that perhaps you might know a few other clergy families, but they may never have had to sort of make sure that adaptations for a disabled child are put into a house and what are reasonable expectations to have and how long should it take and when in the... So there are some of those more like just part of the job questions, moving house that happens. Then we've got
transferring an EHCP. Like for some of our Methodist colleagues where that happens more often, how do you manage those moves so that they're as low impact as possible on family members? So in a sense, having that as a clergy group with some of those more specific needs, it helps it stay sort of positive and healthy because we recognise the shared challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. I never thought about it like that because, your housing you're given that space, aren't you, to live with your family, but it still has to work.
Yeah, and in the Church of England, particularly, whilst I have the role as an incumbent, the house is mine, but obviously it's not really mine in the sense that...
We can put shelves up.
So it's not like renting.
So we can't knock a wall down.
Yeah. So there's when it comes to some of those big things like the bathroom or a kitchen being safe for a child with a learning disability, how you go around living with perhaps the frustration that it can't be what it would be if you owned the house yourself.
Yeah.
And helping people to discern, because, and again, in the Church of England setup, some people, I think within the group, as you take on a new role, you sort of start looking at a new house. And do you move into that role before the house is ready, or do you wait? And how long do you wait? And it can...
And some local authorities will accept a bishop's letter to say that you're going to be moving into that role, and they will start to allocate school places before the family relocates. Other local authorities won't accept the bishop's letter and will only start to allocate school places once the family is in situ, and it needs to be different in different places.
It gives you that space and the tools and the support to really come to terms with things in your own way, individually, and the resilience, the tools to carry on.
That's how one parent described when dreams change. Could you help others feel the same? Join Growing Hope as a course facilitator and support parents of children with additional needs. You don't need to be an expert, just someone who cares.
It doesn't take loads of time, but it's a brilliant resource that really changes lives.
So if there are families listening, there will be families listening who absolutely resonate with your story and your experience.
But I think it's one of the things we've noticed in our family is that it's really easy for children to be aware that they're different and to take on society's assumption that being different means less than. And I think it's a real dream of ours to be able to find ways of communicating, not just to our children, but to children in that place, that being different doesn't mean less than. It means bringing something new to church or something that other people would never have seen.
But I think also sort of the mental health side of some kind of devotional that would support children with mental health difficulties, that talks through the Bible perspective, rather than, if they're fortunate enough to access support for their mental health through CAMS, not knowing necessarily whether the worldview that's being presented by external agencies is not going to harm their faith later on. And so having a resource available. But I've also, a couple of years ago, I taught the daughter of a friend who had similar needs to our son. So sociable, well-trained in phonics, but who had a lot of difficulties with understanding vocabulary. So our son might be able to read something quite fluently, possibly even with expression, words that he might even use in a sentence, but when you dig down further, he doesn't actually know what those words mean. It was this student, and a while I was going through Bible passages with her as tutoring, which was lovely, and going through and working out the challenges that she was having in comprehending the Bible and comprehending just New Testament stories that she will have heard for a long time. She was 16. But her mum and I realised that there's a real comprehension difficulty. So that's something also that I'd like to look into, but something that's accessible but not babyish as well. And really picking up vocab to help with that. But another dream that's
it's really important that actually they have that reinforcement through, like you're saying, those devotionals, and saying, who has God made you to be, and not who the world says you must be. You must be able to do this, that and the other to fit in. So I'm praying that you get those things out into the whether they happen. I'm praying that you do. It's been really insightful actually to talk to you today. Really, really good. Some of the things that you've said are even in my it's not that vast, but the vast enough experience. There's things that I haven't thought about. So, it's given me a lot of food for thought. Before we kind of end this conversation, is there something that either of you, both of you, can share something that you have learnt along your journey that has really kind of encouraged you?
I think it's fair to say that, so we have 4 children. One of them is still quite young, but the other 3 are diagnosed with various different stuff going on. We're both neurodivergent as well. There's a lot of complexity in our lives. And I've just today been studying 2 Timothy, and Paul's invitation to Timothy to come along and sort of share in his suffering. And you think he starts off the letter by saying, "Beloved son," and now he's saying, "Come and share in my suffering." And the reason he's inviting him to share in his suffering is partly because that's what happens when you stand up for the gospel, but it's also because as he's experiencing the persecution he's experiencing, he's also experiencing God in the midst of that struggle. And so he's then able to preach from that reality of, this is where God found me. And, no one ever, used to do stuff with the Army Reserves. No one tells the war story of the day they went for a picnic. The story that's powerful and impactful is the day when everything was difficult, but we got through it. And for me, one of the challenges of doing ministry that sometimes out of a complicated family situation, is being able to, how do we tell the story of saying God is in this and he's with us through the struggles that come from local authorities or NHS wait times or whatever it is. And we see him providing and we see him sustaining us. And so whatever, family person who's struggling, family person who feels lost and alone, family person who feels like they're struggling and is abandoned, God is with you. And this is how he's been with me in my struggles. And I know he's with you in your struggles, and being able to support people. I think that's, the desire to write that book is the desire to say, you are not your struggles. God is with you and you are his beloved child.
That's great. If people need to hear those messages time and time again, because tomorrow morning will be another day when I have to get up and face that struggle or the challenge, but knowing deep that God is with us is really important. We are going to link all of everything that you've said, as much as what you've said, in the show notes, so we can get people, signing up to the Facebook group, and just anyone who's needing that support and hasn't got that around them, that they can at least find you guys and and hopefully be either signposted to somewhere else, or they can look at what Growing Hope does as well. But it's been a real pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for what you've brought to us.